Scott, let's talk about 5G. A lot of people look at what's happened over the last week and they say, I have no sense of when this is going to be resolved and how long it's going to take, let alone why we got to this place. What's your sense in terms of when you and your suppliers who supply the altimeters and some of your other key equipment will be able to say with conviction, we're good to go with 5G being turned on at all of the airports in the U.S.?
Well, in hindsight, I certainly wish this had been resolved sooner. But the good news is now, we are in a position where I think there's a pretty clear roadmap to get this solved, where we can have fulsome rollout of 5G for the telecoms without impacting aviation. And a huge credit and thank you to the administration, Secretary Buttigieg in particular, but also Hans and John, the CEOs of Verizon and AT&T, who agreed to this voluntarily. It would have had catastrophic impacts. The good news is now everyone is working together. And, this has been done in 40 other countries. There are some limitations around airports in all of those countries, but we can do the same thing here in the United States and successfully roll out a fulsome 5G deployment that can coexist peacefully with aviation without having significant impacts. And I'm certain and confident that we're on the road to doing that now.
Do you sense we get there, let's say within a month, where you guys can say, it's all done? Or do you think it's going to take longer?
Well, I think what's really going to happen is the manufacturers of the altimeters, along with the aircraft manufacturers, are going to work with the FAA and the telecoms in particular and create essentially a roadmap, a rule book of how you deploy near airports, what the power levels are, what the antenna directions are. And that'll give clarity to all of the telecoms of where they can put them. And there'll probably be some kind of approval process, but it'll become part of just the routine process around airports. You go through this routine approval process. There's a model that everyone agrees on and understands. That doesn't exist today. It does exist in other countries, and it'll exist here. And once we have that, this will just become a routine part of business. It won't have big impacts on aviation, and the telecoms will be able to roll out 5G for all of us really everywhere that they need to.
Scott, what's the problem technically? I still don't get it. Is it a problem with the 5G technology? Is it a problem with the altimeter technology that's used in some of these wide body planes, especially from Boeing? Where's the problem?
Look, the real problem is interference with the radio altimeters. And the bands are close enough that if they're too close, if the tower is too close to the airplane, it does create interference. That's a known fact. Now, the most modern technology, sometimes that's as small as 200 feet. Sometimes it can be a couple of miles. But when it creates that interference and you get spurious signals, those systems on modern airplanes, like the 777, it controls the pitch control. It controls everything on the airplane because that's accurate today to within less than a foot. And so the landing for a 777, for example, is dependent on the radio altimeter giving those very accurate readings. And if you now say you get spurious data in the radio altimeter and you have to turn it off, that means in a 777, the pitch control is turned off and you can't land the airplane. So really what has happened is because that data on radio altimeters is so good and so precise, it's built into all the safety systems that we have on modern airplanes, and you have to turn all of those off if you can't trust the data from radio altimeters. The solution to this is going to be just getting the right power levels, the right antenna directions, and the right locations for towers, and then we can turn all the towers on without getting spurious data into the radio altimeters.
But is this a problem? Like, should the FCC never have sold the spectrum? Like, I'm still flabbergasted that we got to this point, spent $80 billion selling that stuff and building it up. And then, like, the week it's supposed to turn on, said, oh, by the way, this causes a serious safety issue for airplanes.
It has been a little Alice in Wonderland to go through it. Again, thanks to the administration and the telecoms for finally, before it got to the brink of getting it done. Look, the FAA and the FCC have to work together. Our government agencies need to work with each other. They can't work in isolation. They need to work with each other and find solutions. And look, we're going to get this solved now. There'll be plenty of time to figure out what we should have done differently. I wish we'd have done all this. Wish all this had been done earlier, but it wasn't. We are where we are. But the good news is it now has industry involved. Instead of being, just two agencies working with each other, the airlines, the aircraft manufacturers, the telecoms, and the equipment manufacturers are involved. And we weren't involved before. And now all of us are involved. And so that's why I'm confident we're going to get to ultimately get to a solution. And it's now escalated to the highest levels at the FAA and the administration, Secretary Buttigieg. We've got the right people focused on it to make sure that this actually gets solved in a way that works for everyone.
Hey, Scott, yesterday we had Hans Vestberg from Verizon on, and I asked him point blank, would you feel comfortable and safe in a plane landing at an airport effectively where this 5G service was turned on? He said yes. Would you?
Look, I come from a different industry, and I have immense respect for Hans and immense appreciation for him agreeing to voluntarily. But the standards that we have in aviation are 10 to the minus ninth or 10 to the ninth power on safety, and we simply don't compromise on safety. And when the FAA is telling us it's not safe to land, one, we don't have any discretion in that, but two, even if we did, we wouldn't do it. And so at least at the 10 to the ninth power safety, I would not be comfortable flying those aircraft with passengers on board until we get it resolved. But the good news is we're going to get it resolved.